Welcome to the Unity BootCamp lesson on authentication error handling. When we covered authentication in previous lessons, we did not cover how to handle authentication errors. If we were to authenticate with the example game but enter an incorrect password, then as you can see, we'd be stuck on the connecting screen. Stop the game and open Visual Studio and navigate to the network class. In the authentication request failed delegate, add a parameter named error message of type string. Scroll down and declare a public method called reset stored profile ID. This method will erase the profile ID that has been saved to the user's device. Scroll down to the bottom. Declare a private method named extract status message. This method will parse the error JSON string that is returned on an authentication error and extract the status message and return it. Above this method, declare a private method called handle authentication error. In the body, log the error message and if set, invoke the authentication request failed delegate, passing in the error message as the argument. Scroll up and find the reconnect method. In the body of the failure callback lambda, delete the existing code and replace it with a formatted error string that includes the extracted status message and invoke the handle authentication error method, passing in the formatted error message and the authentication request failed delegate as the arguments. Scroll down. We need to modify the remaining 3 authentication methods with the same change as the reconnect method. In the request anonymous authentication method, in the body of the failure callback lambda, delete the existing code and replace it with a formatted error message that includes the extracted status message and then invoke the handle authentication error method, passing in the formatted error message and the authentication request failed delegate. In the request authentication email method, in the body of the failure callback lambda, delete the existing code and replace it with a formatted error message that includes the extracted status message and then invoke the handle authentication error method, passing in the formatted error message and the authentication request failed delegate. In the request authentication universal method, in the body of the failure callback lambda, delete the existing code and replace it with a formatted error message that includes the extracted status message and then invoke the handle authentication error method, passing in the formatted error message and the authentication request failed delegate. Save the file and navigate to the game class. Scroll down and find the onAuthentication request completed method. Below it, declare a public method named onAuthentication request failed. In the body, check to see if the game state is authenticated. If it is, set the game state to gameplay, then hide the connecting dialog and show the error dialog, passing in the error message parameter as the argument. We'll also invoke the network class's reset stored profile ID method. In the handle authentication method, we now need to supply the onAuthentication request failed method as an argument to the network's reconnect request, and also to the dialog manager's show email login dialog method. Save the file and navigate back into Unity. If you need to perform a manual refresh, do so now. Run the game. Attempt to log in, but enter an incorrect password. Notice that the error dialog is displayed with the status message. Close the error dialog, then click brainCloud followed by login. Enter the correct password. Notice that we've successfully authenticated with brainCloud. Stop the game. There's another kind of error I'd like to show you how to handle in your game or app. Open your web browser and navigate to the brainCloud design portal. Click Core App Info, then Platforms. From this screen, you can set the platforms that your game or app supports. Any attempt to authenticate with brainCloud from an unsupported platform will result in an error, but that's not the error that we're going to be adding support for in the example game. Notice the column that says minimum version. This allows you to set a minimum version of your game that is supported. Suppose your game was on version 1.5.0 and you implemented a major new feature and incremented the version to 2.0.0. You could then set the minimum version here to 2.0.0 and everyone that's running a previous version of your game or app would then need to update the game or app in order to authenticate with brainCloud. For iOS, click the minimum version to open the side panel. Click Edit and then set the minimum version to 1.0.1. Below that, set an upgrade message. This is an error message that will be displayed to the user to encourage them to upgrade to the desired version of your game. Copy the upgrade message and then click Save. Click the Linux minimum version and then click Edit. Set the minimum version to 1.0.1, then paste in the upgrade message and click Save. Click the macOS minimum version and then click Edit. Set the minimum version to 1.0.1, then paste in the upgrade message and click Save. Scroll down and click the Windows minimum version. Click Edit, set the minimum version to 1.0.1, then paste in the upgrade message and click Save. Before we return to Unity, let's experiment in the API Explorer. Before authenticating, in the parameters section, ensure the game's version is lower than 1.0.1. Click Execute to authenticate. Notice the response. The upgrade app ID key contains the upgrade message that was set in the previous screen. This is the value that we need to display to the user in the Unity example game. In the parameters section, change the game version to 1.0.1. Notice that the response was successful. Open Unity and run the game. Notice that we get an error message, but it's not the upgrade message that we set in the design portal. Our code isn't set up to parse that value yet. Open Visual Studio and navigate to the network class. Above the extract status message method, declare a private method called handleAppVersionError. This method will parse the error JSON string that is returned on an authentication error and extract the upgrade app ID message and store it as a local string. Then invoke the handleAuthenticationError method, pass in the upgrade app ID message and the authentication request failed delegate in as the arguments. Scroll up to the reconnect method. In the failure callback lambda, check to see if the lambda's code parameter is equal to the game version not supported reason code. If it is, invoke the handleAppVersionError method, pass in the JSON error and the authentication request failed delegate as the arguments, and then add the lambda's existing code in an else statement. We need to do the same logic for the other 3 authentication methods. Copy the if-else statements and paste the code in the failure callback lambdas of the other 3 authentication methods. Save the file and then navigate back into Unity. If you need to perform a manual refresh, do so now. Run the game. Enter a valid email and password. Notice the error dialog's error message displays the app upgrade message that we set in the design portal. Stop the game, click Edit, then Project Settings. On the left, click Player, then set the version to 1.0.1. Close the project settings. Run the game. Enter a valid email and password. Notice that the game successfully authenticated. That's because the game's version is now set to 1.0.1. Stop the game, open your web browser and navigate to the brainCloud API reference. Open the Authenticate email password request, although it could be any of the authentication requests. Notice the error handling example. In the example game, we are only handling the game version not supported error, and then the rest of the errors, we are simply displaying the brainCloud status message to the users. As you can see, there are additional types of authentication errors that can be returned, and perhaps in your game or app, you'll want to display a more accessible error message to the user. Scrolling down, you'll see a list of status codes and their descriptions, just like we did with the game version not supported reason code. To handle any of these errors in your game or app, just check the code parameter in the failure callback lambda. An overview of external authentication is the next lesson in the Unity BootCamp.